I used to believe that love could fix anything, that if your heart was pure and your intentions real, the universe would somehow reward you. But the truth I learned overseas was colder than I ever imagined. She didn't love me. She loved what I could give her. When I finally realized it, it was already too late. Every cent I had saved for a new beginning had vanished, spent on debts I never knew existed, for a woman I thought I knew better than myself. This is the story of how I got used slowly, sweetly, completely, until there was nothing left of me but regret. I had been living in the States all my life, working the same job for over 15 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. I managed a small construction crew, long hours, decent pay, a lot of responsibility. But after my divorce, I started feeling like my life was just passing by. Empty house, quiet weekends, no one to come home to. I was 51, and even though I didn't look my age, I felt it in my bones. One night, scrolling through YouTube, I stumbled upon a video about men who retired abroad, Thailand, the Philippines, Cambodia. They all talked about how their money stretched further, how life was slower, simpler, and most of all, they talked about finding love again. At first, I laughed at it, but then it got me thinking. Maybe I deserved another shot. Maybe I could start over somewhere that didn't remind me of everything I'd lost. I spent months researching, watching vlogs, reading expat forums, looking at cost of living comparisons. Thailand kept coming up. The people were friendly, the culture welcoming, the beaches looked like something out of a dream. So one morning, after another sleepless night, I just did it. I booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok. My first few weeks felt like a honeymoon with life itself. Everything was new, the smells, the food, the constant buzz of scooters. Even the chaos had its own rhythm. I rented a small apartment near the coast. Nothing fancy, but close enough to the sea that I could hear the waves at night. That's when I met Nok. She worked at a local cafe, the kind with old wooden tables and soft music playing in the background. She was always smiling, always moving, and when she spoke to me in her soft English, it felt like the world slowed down for a second. She started calling me Kun, a polite way to address someone, but the way she said it made it sound affectionate. We talked about everything, her family in the countryside, my life back home, what brought me to Thailand. At first, it was just coffee and small talk. Then one day, she invited me to join her after work for dinner. She ordered for us both, laughing when I couldn't handle the spice. It felt so easy, so natural. For the first time in years, someone seemed genuinely happy to see me. Weeks turned into months. Nok and I grew close. She would come over after work, cook dinner in my small kitchen, sometimes stay the night. I started to notice how she looked at me when I spoke, like she was truly listening. She told me she'd never met a man who treated her with kindness. Her ex-boyfriend, she said, had left her in debt, taking loans in her name and disappearing. She had been struggling to pay it off ever since. That part made me ache inside. I'd been through my own share of betrayal. My ex-wife had drained our joint account before the divorce papers even cleared. Maybe that's why I felt such a strong urge to protect Nok. I didn't see her as just a girlfriend. She was someone who'd been hurt, like me. And maybe, deep down, I wanted to be the one to save her. I started helping her in small ways, paying for groceries, covering dinner, helping her send a little money back to her mother. It wasn't much, maybe a few $100s a month, but she always thanked me like it was the world. Then one night, while we were sitting on the balcony watching the sunset, she started crying. She told me the loan sharks were threatening her family, that if she didn't pay soon, they might take their land. She said she was ashamed to even ask, but she didn't know what else to do. I remember her voice trembling as she said, "I don't want to lose you too." That line broke me. Without hesitation, I told her I'd help however I could. She said the total debt was around 300,000 baht, about $8,500 USD. It was a lot, but I had savings. I figured if we were going to build a life together, it was worth it. She cried again that night, not from sadness, but relief. She said she'd never forget what I did for her. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. But I wasn't thinking with logic anymore. I was thinking with hope. Over the next few months, Nak's debts kept resurfacing. First, it was another creditor she forgot to mention. Then a sick relative who needed surgery. Then her brother, who apparently had borrowed money under her name. Every time I helped, every time she promised it was the last. We even started talking about marriage. She said her family would be proud if I came to visit them, that it would show them I was serious. So I bought a ticket to her hometown in the countryside. The day before we left, she asked if I could lend her a little extra just to clear everything before the trip so her family wouldn't be embarrassed. That little extra turned out to be the rest of my emergency savings. Still, I gave it because I believed we were building something real, because I thought love meant sacrifice, and because deep down I was terrified of losing the only person who had made me feel alive again. When the plane touched down in her province, I felt nervous but excited. Nak seemed distant though, always texting, always stepping away to take calls. When I asked who it was, she said it was her cousin arranging the family gathering. But when we arrived, nobody was there to greet us. That's when I noticed the look in her eyes, not guilt, not sadness, just emptiness. She told me to wait at a cafe while she went to sort something out. She never came back. The morning after she disappeared was the longest morning of my life. I sat in that cafe for hours, watching the door, convincing myself she'd walk back in with some kind of explanation, maybe a misunderstanding, maybe she lost her phone, maybe anything that would make this nightmare make sense. But as the hours turned into evening and then night, the truth started to settle in like a sickness in my stomach. She wasn't coming back. I went to the small guest house where we'd booked our room. The receptionist told me Nak had checked out that morning alone and taken the rest of our things. My passport, thankfully, was still in my sling bag. Everything else was gone. My mind kept replaying every moment we'd shared. The laughter, the nights on the balcony, the gentle way she'd touch my arm when she talked about the future. It all felt real. And yet, standing there in that empty room, it all dissolved like smoke. After 2 days of sleepless panic, I went to the local police. They were polite but distant. A foreign man losing money to a local woman wasn't exactly breaking news to them. The officer just sighed and said, "Many stories like this. You trust too much." That line burned. I wasn't some naive kid fresh off the plane. I lived, worked, suffered, rebuilt. I thought I understood people. But in that moment, I realized how blind I'd been to everything except the fantasy I wanted to believe in. Still, I couldn't let go. I spent weeks trying to find her. I checked her cafe, she'd quit. I went back to her apartment empty. I even called the number she used to text me from. It was disconnected. She'd vanished completely, leaving nothing but the echo of her voice in my head. When I finally flew back to Bangkok, I felt hollow. I'd lost money, yes, but it was more than that. It was trust. It was the illusion that maybe, just maybe, I could start again without carrying my past with me. But life has a strange way of twisting fate. 2 months later, while eating breakfast at a street stall, I saw her again. She was walking on the opposite side of the road, arm in arm with another man, a foreigner, older than me, smiling like I used to. Time froze. My chest tightened. I wanted to run across, shout, demand answers. But all I could do was watch as she laughed, rested her head on his shoulder, and disappeared into the crowd. That's when it hit me. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. For weeks, I spiraled. I drank too much, barely ate, replayed everything in my mind. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it, the little signs, the inconsistencies, the half-truths she told so naturally. But the worst part was realizing I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself. Because deep down, I knew I saw the red flags. I just chose to ignore them. She'd always been careful about money, insisting she didn't want to be a burden, saying things like, "I'll pay you back soon." She'd always had a reason for every problem, a sick relative, a lost job, a loan shark breathing down her neck. And each time I helped, it felt like I was doing good, like I was being the man she needed. But all along, she was grooming me emotionally, slowly, skillfully, and I let her. I tried to move on. I rented a smaller place in Chiang Mai, took long walks, started volunteering at an English center. It was supposed to be a clean slate. Then one afternoon, while scrolling through Facebook, a message popped up. It was from Nak. She said she was sorry, that she'd made mistakes, that she'd been desperate. She said she never meant to hurt me, that everything we had was real at the start, but she lost control. I didn't know what to believe. She asked if we could meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe downtown, different from the one where we'd first talked, but with the same kind of soft music playing. When she walked in, my heart sank. She looked thinner, more fragile, like life had beaten her down. We sat across from each other in silence for a while before she finally spoke. "I was scared," she said. "You were too good. I didn't think someone like you could love someone like me. I wanted to hate her, I really did. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw the same sadness that had drawn me to her in the first place." She told me she'd gotten in deep with people she couldn't repay, that the money I gave her only covered part of it. When she left, she said she thought she was protecting me, that if she stayed, I'd keep losing more. It sounded like a story, but part of it felt true. Maybe she was just manipulating me again. Maybe she was being honest for the first time. The truth is, by then, it didn't matter. The damage was already done. We talked for over an hour. She cried more than once. When she finally stood to leave, she placed her hand on mine and said, "Thank you for not shouting." Then she walked out and never looked back. I sat there for a long time listening to the clatter of cups and the hum of the air conditioner. It felt like I just buried something, not just her, but the version of myself that believed love could fix what was broken inside me. In the following weeks, I learned more about how these things really worked. Other expats told me similar stories, different faces, same patterns. Women with sob stories, debts, family emergencies, each playing the same emotional game. It wasn't always malicious. They said sometimes it was just survival. That word stuck with me. Survival. In their world, love wasn't romance. It was strategy. And in mine, love was blind faith. Two worlds colliding, one fighting to live, the other fighting to feel alive. I spent months trying to understand her, not to justify what she did, but to make sense of it. She wasn't evil. She was broken. And so was I. We were just two people trying to fill an emptiness. But in doing so, we ended up consuming each other. Sometimes I still dream of her. The way she laughed when I mispronounced Thai words. The way she'd hum when she cooked. The way she'd rest her head on my shoulder and whisper, "You make me feel safe." But those memories don't hurt anymore. They remind me of what I gave and what I lost, chasing love in a place that sold the idea of paradise. Because that's what it really was, an illusion. A paradise built on dreams and desperation, where people like me go searching for love, and people like her go searching for a way out. And somewhere in between, both of us lost ourselves. After that meeting with Knock, I tried to convince myself that I was fine, that closure was enough. I told myself I could move on, focus on work, and let the past fade like a bad dream. But the truth is, her absence didn't heal me, it hollowed me. I'd walk through the night market surrounded by the smell of grilled meat, neon signs flickering, people laughing, and I'd feel like I didn't belong to any of it. Every couple I saw reminded me of what I'd lost. And every Thai song that drifted from a cafe or tuk-tuk pulled me back to her balcony, to the sound of her voice, to a time when I still believed that love could be simple. In those quiet months, I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way foreign men my age looked when they walked around alone, half content, half haunted. I saw myself in them. Some wore gold chains, some drank too much, some chased younger women to feel young again, but behind all of it, I could sense the same longing. We all came here looking for something we'd lost back home: love, youth, purpose, and most of us paid for it one way or another. One evening, I was sitting at a small bar run by an older British expat named Jim. He'd been in Thailand for over 20 years and had seen it all. He looked at me over his beer and said, "Let me guess, mate, she took your money, said she'd pay it back, then vanished?" When I nodded, he chuckled softly, not out of cruelty but recognition. "Happened to me twice," he said. "You think you're different, that you found the one who's not like the others. But they all play the same game because they know we want to believe." I didn't want to believe him. I wanted to think that Nok was an exception, that she cared, even if she'd made mistakes. But deep down, his words hit something raw. I started to realize how well she'd read me. From the very beginning, she had mirrored everything I wanted to see: vulnerability, loyalty, innocence. She'd built her image around my needs, like a reflection designed to make me trust her. The worst part wasn't the money. It was how she made me question my own instincts. Every time I remembered how easily I'd given in the transfers, the excuses, the way I'd brushed off my friends' warnings, it made me wonder what kind of man I'd become. I wasn't naive, but love had made me gullible. And in a place like Thailand, that kind of weakness doesn't go unnoticed. Months passed, and I tried dating again, telling myself I could start fresh, this time with my eyes open. But something in me had changed. Every smile felt rehearsed, every compliment rehearsed, every story suspicious. I listened to women talk about their lives, family struggles, financial hardships, and instead of feeling empathy, I felt suspicion. I hated that version of myself, but I couldn't turn it off. I was living in a paradise that had turned into a theater, and I no longer trusted the actors. I met one woman, Mai, who worked at a massage shop near my apartment. She was kind, funny, and surprisingly direct. We had dinner a few times, and she told me about her son, about her dreams of opening her own shop. I wanted to believe she was different, but when she asked me to help her buy a new motorbike so she could visit her family, I froze. The same script, the same soft tone, the same gentle guilt. I didn't accuse her, but I never called her again. That's when I started to pull away from everyone. I became the quiet foreigner who kept to himself. I'd spend my days teaching basic English to kids in the mornings, and my nights alone watching the city lights from my window. I told myself I was content with solitude, but really, I was just afraid of being fooled again. The irony was that I'd escaped my old life to find peace, and now I was living in another cage, one built from mistrust. Sometimes I'd hear about Nok through whispers. Someone said they saw her in Pattaya working at a bar. Another said she had married a German man and moved to Chiang Rai. I never knew what was true, but every rumor reminded me of how easily she could adapt, how effortlessly she could become whoever she needed to be. And every time I thought about her, part of me still wanted to believe she meant at least some of it. One night, drunk and tired, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, us at the beach, her laughing with ice cream on her nose, her arms around me while fireworks lit up the sky. It hit me then that I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning the person I thought she was, the dream I had built around her, the fantasy of being loved without conditions. That realization should have set me free, but it didn't. Because once you've been used like that emotionally, financially, spiritually, something inside you doesn't quite heal. It becomes a quiet ache that follows you, a whisper that says, you'll never be enough unless you're paying for it. And when that thought settles in, your bones, paradise, doesn't feel like paradise anymore. It feels like punishment. It was around that time that I started writing again. At first, it was just notes, things I wanted to remember, lessons I didn't want to forget. Then it became longer entries, pieces of confession I'd never show anyone. I wrote about the way Nock looked at me the first night we met, about the lie that sounded like love, about how easy it is to mistake kindness for affection when you're lonely. Writing didn't fix anything, but it gave me back a little control. It turned the chaos into sentences and the heartbreak into something I could name. One day, I wrote down a single line that stuck with me. Maybe I didn't lose her. Maybe I lost a part of myself that believed love was a transaction. It was the first time I felt something close to peace. Still, there were nights when I'd wake up from a dream where she was next to me, whispering, "Everything will be okay." And for a few seconds, before reality set in, I'd almost believe her again. That's the cruelest part of it all, the way your mind keeps replaying the good parts, editing out the lies, because it misses the feeling of being wanted. You can forgive the person who hurt you, but forgetting the illusion they gave you, that's what takes years. And even now, years later, when I walk by the cafe where we first met, I still glance inside. Not because I expect to see her, but because part of me still wants to understand how something that started so beautifully could end so hollow. Maybe it wasn't love. Maybe it was two people, both lonely, both pretending that the world made sense for a little while. But I know one thing for sure. The cracks were always there. I just chose not to see them. It's strange how quickly you can go from believing you've built a new life to realizing you've only been running from the ruins of the old one. When I look back now, the real collapse didn't happen when Nock took the money. It started long before that, the moment I began mistaking escape for healing. I thought moving halfway across the world would give me peace, but all it did was put distance between me and my problems. The same loneliness, the same insecurities, the same need to be seen followed me here like shadows that don't care about geography. The collapse began slowly. I'd wake up each morning with no reason to get out of bed. The heat felt heavier, the sounds of the street more intrusive. I used to love the morning markets, the smell of grilled pork, the women laughing behind their stalls. Now it all felt like background noise to a life I didn't want anymore. My savings were running low, my work at the English Center barely covered rent, and every time I checked my bank app, I could almost hear Nock's voice in my head saying, "Just this one last time." There's a certain humiliation that comes with realizing you've been used. It's not just the financial loss, it's the quiet shame of knowing that you let it happen, that you looked straight at the red flags and decided they were just decorations. I carried that shame like a secret, pretending I was fine when people asked, pretending to laugh when I wanted to scream. At night, I'd drink just enough to blur the edges of memory, then stare at the ceiling, trying to remember the man I was before I came here. One afternoon, I got a message from Jim, the British expat who'd become something of a reluctant mentor. He told me a small construction project near Chiang Rai needed someone who could manage the crew and handle budgeting. It wasn't much, but it paid decently and got me out of the city. I took the job mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe being busy would drown out the noise in my head. Chiang Rai was quieter, greener, almost too peaceful. The locals smiled as I passed, kids waved from bikes, and the mountains stood in the distance like ancient gods watching over the broken. I rented a small house near the site, 1 bedroom, tin roof, the kind of place where silence gets loud at night. The job was fine, the men respectful, the pay steady, but even in that calm, the ghosts followed me. Every payday, I'd see Knox's face in my mind, the way she looked when she cried on that balcony, the tremble in her voice when she said she'd pay me back. I knew she never would. Yet, part of me didn't even want the money anymore. I just wanted to know why. Why go through all the effort of pretending to love someone when it would all end in betrayal anyway? Sometimes I'd imagine she really had been desperate, trapped in a web of debt she couldn't escape. Maybe she thought using me was her only way out. Maybe she hated herself for it. Or maybe, and this was the thought that hurt most, she simply didn't care. She'd learned how to read men like me, how to play our savior complex like a violin. I was just another note in a song she'd played many times before. As months went by, I fell into a quiet rhythm. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The job kept my hands busy, but my mind stayed restless. I avoided socializing, avoided bars, avoided anything that reminded me of the man who had once believed in love. But life, in its cruel humor, has a way of testing whether you've really learned your lesson. One evening, after finishing a long day at the site, I stopped by a roadside stall to eat. The woman who ran it was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a voice that carried calm instead of charm. She served me rice and curry, asked where I was from, and we ended up talking for nearly an hour. Her name was Dow. She told me she'd been widowed young, that she worked every day to keep her 2 children in school. She wasn't flirtatious, wasn't trying to impress me, she was simply human. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something shift. I started visiting her stall regularly. Sometimes we'd talk about nothing, weather, food, small town gossip, and other times about life, about loss, about the strange loneliness that comes from having lived too long. I didn't realize it at first, but those talks started to heal me in ways I didn't expect. She never asked for money, never hinted at anything beyond conversation. Her presence reminded me that not everyone wanted something from me. But healing isn't a straight line. One day, while I was eating, her teenage son came by on a new scooter. I heard Dow say something about her brother helping with the payment. For a second, that old paranoia came rushing back. My chest tightened. My mind whispered, "Here we go again." I finished my meal quickly and left without saying much. That night, lying in bed, I realized how broken I'd become. I couldn't even accept kindness without suspicion. I turned into a man who saw manipulation in every gesture. Knock hadn't just taken my money, she'd stolen my ability to trust. Over the following weeks, I forced myself to keep visiting Dow's stall, not because I wanted romance, but because I didn't want fear to win. I told her about Knock one evening, the whole story. She didn't pity me or tell me I was foolish. She just said, "You love too strong. Some people see that and use it. But that doesn't make you weak. It just means your heart works too much." Her words stayed with me for days. I realized then that my collapse hadn't been caused by love. It was caused by the illusion that love was a solution. I'd gone looking for it like it was medicine, something to fix what was broken inside me. But love doesn't fix you, it only shows you where the cracks are. Work ended after 6 months, and I left Chiang Rai with a sense of quiet acceptance. I didn't find redemption there, but I found stillness. Enough to look at myself without disgust. Enough to see Knock not as a villain, but as a mirror, one that reflected everything I refused to face. My need to rescue, my loneliness, my pride. Back in Bangkok, I sold most of my things and booked a flight home. I told myself it was time. Time to stop chasing happiness in places that weren't mine. Time to stop confusing paradise with peace. When the plane took off, I looked down at the shimmering lights of the city and whispered her name one last time, not in anger, but in farewell. Somewhere down there, she was probably laughing with someone new, telling another story, building another illusion, and that was okay, because I wasn't her victim anymore. I was her lesson. And maybe, just maybe, she was mine. When I returned home, everything felt smaller. My house, my town, even the sky. The streets I used to know by heart now felt foreign, as if I were walking through a faded version of my own life. I left searching for something bigger, something that made me feel alive. But standing there again, surrounded by what I once called stability, I realized how much I'd changed. I wasn't the same man who'd boarded that flight full of hope and naive excitement. I'd seen what paradise looks like when the mask falls off beautiful on the outside, hollow within. At first, I couldn't tell anyone what had really happened. Friends and family asked how Thailand was, and I just said, it was a good experience. They smiled, assuming I meant beaches and sunsets. But what I really meant was that it taught me something I wish I'd learned a long time ago. Peace doesn't come from a place or from a person. It comes from knowing who you are when everything else is stripped away. The months that followed were quiet. I went back to work, kept to myself, and tried to rebuild the simple parts of my life: morning coffee, long walks, fixing things around the house. I thought about Nok more often than I wanted to admit. Sometimes, I'd dream about her standing by the sea, looking at me the way she used to, that perfect mixture of warmth and mystery. But when I'd wake up, I didn't feel anger anymore, just a dull ache, the kind that reminds you something once mattered. Eventually, I started therapy. I didn't go because I wanted to get over her, but because I wanted to understand me. My therapist asked why I'd gone looking for love in a place where I didn't belong. It took me months to answer. One day, I finally said, because I didn't believe I was worth loving unless I was saving someone. The room went silent after that. I realized I hadn't gone abroad to find happiness. I'd gone there to feel needed. And when Nok saw that, she knew exactly how to use it. It's strange when you're the kind of person who always wants to fix others, you rarely stop to wonder what it would take to fix yourself. I'd spent years thinking love was an act of rescue, when really it should have been an act of understanding. Nok didn't steal my life. She exposed the parts of it I'd been too afraid to face. After therapy, I began writing again. What started as journal entries turned into full stories, small confessions about the people I'd met, the lessons I'd learned, and the price of chasing something you can't buy. I didn't write to get sympathy. I wrote because I wanted to make sense of the silence that followed her leaving. Over time, the words stopped feeling like pain and started feeling like purpose. I joined a small online group of expats men who'd gone through similar experiences in Southeast Asia. At first, the conversations were full of bitterness. Everyone had their own version of the same story. A beautiful woman, a sob story, a slow unraveling. But after a while, we started talking less about them and more about ourselves, about loneliness, aging, fear, the way we all came looking for escape and found reflection instead. That group became a strange kind of brotherhood, men who had fallen in love with paradise and learned what it really costs. One of the guys said something that stuck with me. He said, "We didn't lose to them. We lost to ourselves, to the parts of us that believed we could buy peace." He was right. We went there thinking paradise was a reward, but paradise doesn't owe anyone anything. It just reflects what you bring into it. Years later, I found out through a friend that Nok had been arrested in Chiang Mai for fraud running a scam involving multiple foreigners. When I saw her photo in a local news clip, my heart didn't race. It just hurt quietly. Her face looked older, the charm gone, the sadness still there. I didn't feel vindicated, only tired. I thought about what her life must have been like. The constant lying, the pretending, the fear of running out of people to manipulate. Maybe in her own way, she was as trapped as I had been. I never reached out. I didn't need to. Some stories don't need confrontation, just closure. Now, whenever people ask if I'd ever go back to Thailand, I tell them yes, but not for love. I'd go back for the places I never got to see, for the mountains I didn't climb, for the peace I couldn't find back then. Paradise wasn't the problem. I was. I went there looking for love when I should have been looking for clarity. Today, I live quietly. I work part-time, write in the evenings, and keep my circle small. Some nights, I still dream of that cafe where it all began, the soft music, the smell of coffee, the moment she smiled at me for the first time. But in those dreams, I don't chase her anymore. I just watch her walk away and I let her go. Because I've learned that not every story in paradise has to end in revenge or regret. Some just end in understanding. I don't hate her. I don't hate Thailand. I don't even hate what happened. It broke me open in a way I needed. It showed me that you can lose everything: money, trust, illusion, and still find something honest in the wreckage: yourself. When you give too much of your heart to people who only see value in what you can provide, it's easy to become bitter. But bitterness is just grief that's forgotten how to cry. I've stopped crying. I've stopped blaming. I've stopped pretending that love is something you find in paradise. Because paradise isn't a place, it's a mirror. And sometimes it shows you everything you don't want to see. In paradise, everything has a price. Do you have a story of your own? Email it to us and explain your story, and we'll happily make a video of your adventure to warn others. This was Paradise Traps. Subscribe, like, and share for more stories.